If you ever heard that the UK government had a UFO desk, you have to understand that that is actually true. For decades, members of the public could report unexplained sightings to the Ministry of Defence. Lights in the sky, objects behaving oddly, things didn't seem quite to fit. And contrary to popular belief, the MoD weren't doing this to try and investigate little green men. I hate that term. From the very beginning, the Ministry of Defence's interest was quite simple. Is anything operating in the UK airspace that shouldn't be? The desk itself emerged during the Cold War. When unidentified craft wasn't a curiosity, they were a potential problem. Anything unknown in the sky had to be logged, if only to rule out foreign technology or misidentified military activity. Fast forward to the 1990s. At this point, the MOD's collected decades of reports, and at this point in 1996, it wanted to formally review whether this work was still worth doing. That decision, it led to a defence intelligence study that was completed in 2000. It's often reported as Project Condign. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The job for it was very, very simple and narrow. It needed to answer the question, do these objects represent a threat to national security? The conclusion they came to was no. There was no hostile intent, there was no evidence of advanced tech, there was no indication that anything needed a military response. So from the 2000s onward, the desk had a bit of a character change. It still existed, but it was no longer an intelligence function. It basically became an admin department. They were replying to letters, they were responding to FOIA requests, and basically answering questions from reporters and UFO enthusiasts. The sky hadn't gone quiet, but from an official point of view, the matter was closed. At this point, something really awkward happens. The number of reports didn't go down, they went up. By 2009, the Ministry of Defence received 600 reports in 1 year alone. That was nearly 3 times the number from the previous year. Objects were still being recorded flying through the UK airspace, often silently, without any navigational lights, and often in formation with other lights. None of this was classified as hostile. And that's what turned out to be the really key detail, because the MOD's definition of a threat, well, it had become really specific. If it wasn't attacking, it wasn't worth investigating. So, back to 2009, just as reports are hitting record levels, the decision was made to shut the desk down. Not because nothing was happening, but because officially, nothing important was happening. In November 2009, the desk was closed. On the 1st of December, the official email reporting line and phone line were disconnected, which is a bold administrative move. The objects didn't stop appearing. The airspace didn't become fully understood. It's just the paperwork stopped. And that's where this video starts. Because while the MOD decided there wasn't a threat, they left behind a lot of reports from ordinary people. Pilots, police officers, soldiers, air traffic staff, and members of the public. I've been looking and analysing that data. I've been looking at timings, movements, descriptions, patterns, where, location, and as I go through this video, I'm going to show you what I found. I'm even going to show you some of the actual documents. And you can help work with me figure out, should we actually be knowing a little bit more about this? I want to stress before I start to show it, there is a lot of documents, as I've just said. So I've only looked at 1 month. And what I want to do is show the data as it's accumulating and how it's looking, and then walk you through some actual reports and start to build up a view of what we can do with this data. So follow me. How I've done this is I've painstakingly gone through just 3 documents of nearly 300 actual scanned Ministry of Defence documents. And I just started to look at the detail and try to figure out what was worth capturing. So I broke it down into kind of common sense areas. The year, the month, the full date, the time and the location, how the report came in, how many witnesses, the type of UFO that was spotted, how many of them, where the witness was, the viewing type, the weather condition, any direction of travel that's mentioned, the tone of the witness as well, any high strangeness that seems to be potentially linked to it, the response from the MOD, how long that response took, what follow-up actions were given, the detail that was actually gathered from the report, if I think it's interesting because of the detail that's within it, and then how it links back to the actual files themselves. And then from Mr. Lou Elizondo, I've started to try to assess it and kind of go, well, how does that link to the 7 observables? I am not going to go through this Excel with you. That wouldn't be very fair. But what I have done is I've grouped it up and linked the data together so you can start to see an emerging picture. Now, up in the left here, I'm going to show the volume of reports that have come in a particular year. And as you can see, I'm only looking at 2009 right now. And then the hope is, as over time, because I'm really interested to see where this goes, is to see how this looks over time over the years. And then for that year, I've managed to break it down into the types of UFO that have been spotted, and then the monthly breakdown, and then breakdowns over weeks, so you can actually start to look for particular spikes. This rather tall one was from 31st of October, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to look at November, and I'm going to avoid the 5th of November. Although there are some really interesting sightings on the 5th, I'm going to look at the 7th, and I'm going to actually show you some live cases from the 7th. But then also, for the particular weeks, I broke them down into the UFO types as well. One of the startling things that I've found from this is that the vast majority of sightings, over 50%, 55%, so that's 48 out of 88 sightings in 1 month, were all orange orbs. Weird. And then the second coming in with 18%, so that shows you how much volume it actually is responsible for, is just general lights in the sky being seen. It's interesting to see the peaks and troughs as well as you get towards the end of November. It's quite interesting, the spike here, how it kind of juts up towards the end of October and then starts to come down. So that's the data, and the aim of this is to group that data together to start to see what patterns there are. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now start to read out some of the reports. But I think from this, for the last month that this desk was in operation, I think it paints quite a weird picture that we've got all those bits of activity, and you can rule out a certain percentage for sure, especially the time of year that it's happening on. But why was it a spike that was higher of any other November is an interesting one too. And the fact that they were just orange orbs in all manner of different ways. Let's go through some cases and let's have a look and kind of walk through what people have reported. Okay, so the first one that we're going to look at is, it was reported via email on the 10th of November 2009 for a reporting that was made on the 7th of November. So it's back to that one spiky particular week. It went straight through, and I'm going to show you the responses as well once I give the explanation. You can kind of take your own view of what the tone is coming from the reporter themselves too. So, dear UFO Desk, I posted this as a sighting report, but decided to make a sighting report after seeing that these red things were being seen by many other people over a large area. My first sighting was in Tring at these approximate Google Map coordinates. We were in a family member's back garden which backs onto a large field area. At the time I was chatting to my daughter when I noticed a reddish amber bright object fly across the top of us. I thought it was weird, but I kept thinking it was a Chinese lantern. The apparent speed was about 20 miles an hour overhead. Wind speed seemed non-existent at ground level. It was not as high as low air traffic, but perhaps 8 to 12 stories high. The direction was going as north-northwest, and at the time it was about 8 PM to 8:30 PM. So that's the first sighting. And then this guy goes on. A little while later, whilst driving home, heading on the M1, going through Hemel Hempstead at these approximate Google coordinates, I observed 2 more of them flying together. Not slowly and not fast either. They were red and quite bright, but not really glowing. They were travelling towards a northeasterly direction, and the time was approximately 9:35. The date was the 7th of November. This gent even decided to report it to the UK UFO website where it would appear. That these things have been invading the airspace in the Hertfordshire area around that time. Are you aware what's going on? These things, they did seem to be having a spike on that particular night, seeing multiple different occasions of it by one person alone. And when you actually get into some of the other reports, you'll see that these are happening all over the UK on one particular night, which is kind of crazy. You have to kind of look at the time of year and think, but when you think about the speed that this guy is saying that they're travelling at, they're not making noise. So it's not like you can kind of just brush it off as a firework. There was a standard response that came back from the Ministry of Defence, and you'll see when we go through this, it's carbon copy and paste. It's just basically saying that they examine any reports to establish whether it might have been some defence significance. But as I've said at the beginning, the MOD's perspective on this is if they aren't attacking, they're not interested. So these weren't attacking, but they are invading our airspace, and it doesn't seem like anything can be done about it. So that was Hemel Hempstead. Moving on, we're moving to central London now. And this gent happened to send in a letter. So I'm going to, again, read this out. This morning, on Saturday the 7th of November, between 8:45am and 9am, on my way to work in Victoria, I saw about a dozen people looking up at the sky on Bridge Street. And this was in front of the Hesperia Hotel in the passport office. I asked one of the people what they were looking at, which was something up in the sky on a bright blue clear morning day. I then looked up, and to my amazement and awe, I saw several bright lights flying and drifting quickly and silently up into the sky. They were bright, flickering. They were white, light green and light red lights, similar to how you'd see stars, and they seemed to make a formation. While watching these for about 5 to 10 minutes, I must have counted at least 10 to 15 as they drifting silently high up into the sky. Some seemed to be drifting in groups and others separately. They definitely were not balloons or an aircraft or helicopter. Some of my other colleagues saw them and will sign this letter for proof of witnesses. I would be so grateful if you could investigate this to find out what they were. Maybe get in touch with the Civil Aviation Authority to see if any pilots at the time saw the UFOs or any other organisation, such as the military, might know of something. Sadly, I did not have my camera. I mean, the tone that's coming off this guy is he doesn't really know where to go with it, but there's some concern at the fact he's gone to this length. And it must be disconcerting to be walking around on your way to work and just seeing this thing up in the sky. And again, this is central London, and these things are just at whim, dancing in the sky. He also got the standard letter. Again, not attacking, not interested. I don't know how you can have a situation like that happening in the centre of London and have it described as not interesting. I find it quite bemusing, to be quite honest with you. But we move on. We're moving on to Birmingham at this point. And as you can see, this is another email that's been sent out. Do feel like... So, dear sirs, I wish to report an unusual sighting in South Birmingham sky at 6:50pm. It's on the 7th of November. I was driving from King's Heath to another suburb, Selly Park, when I became of 2 orange glowing orbs travelling across the sky. I parked my car next to the King's Heath Park to observe them more closely and can confirm they were silent. They were travelling in a straight line from south to north, and during which time I watched them, their speed did not falter or increase, it remained consistent. They were not travelling particularly fast and moved in exact tandem. They disappeared from my view of the Moseley area. I'm afraid that I have no idea what height they were at, as I do not know how large the spheres were measured. I can confirm, however, that I watched them for 3 to 4 minutes before they disappeared, and I did try to photograph them. They were definitely not fireworks. And there's a lot of this on this particular period of time. But I come back to the point, right? This is a particular big spike. We all know what fireworks look like. This is the highest spike for 3 years previously, around this time. People can determine whether they're fireworks or not then. Because if it would have happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or the year before, the spikes would always remain the same. But they don't seem to be. And the silence is a big factor. We all know the cry of a firework as it's going. But these things are quiet. And they remain consistent. The speed is at a steady pace. They don't seem to deviate how they're travelling. So I don't think you can brush them off with just the view of they're a firework. The gent got the same response, the same letter. It's at this point I started to notice the time between responses as well. 10th of November he sent the email, and they just spat the letter out on the same day, which I think is a bit of a shame, because people are doing this, people are writing in out of genuine concern. It's just a shame that the MoD didn't share that concern. We move on. At this point we're going to move to Scotland, and I hope I get this right. Calendar? Another email. And you'll tend to find that the emails are the ones that generate the most detail, because on the phone line ones, the amount of information which is recorded is just poor. There's nothing. But I'll go into the report. I would like to report an unusual incident that I witnessed on Saturday night of 7th of November. So at this point, we're in Scotland, so we've seen them in Birmingham, we've seen them in Hemel Hempstead, London during the morning, and now we're up in Scotland. This was approximately 10 PM. I was attending a party at a cottage outside Callander in Perthshire, Scotland, and it was a cold, clear night with no cloud cover, and whilst admiring the stars I noticed a light moving across the sky going east to west. I assumed it was the lights from a plane, but it stopped suddenly and appeared to tilt and displayed what looked like up to 20 individual orange lights. It remained static for about 15 seconds before it tilted back into its original position. I called my wife, but by the time she got there the light had moved off, travelling in the same direction across the sky. My wife said it was just a plane, but I remained convinced that what I saw was not a plane. I was attending an outdoor 18th birthday party and drank around 3 to 4 cans of beer, but I was in no way drunk. The majority of the partygoers were either in an outside tent or indoors, therefore I had no other witnesses. I am 53 years of age, I'm married with 2 grown-up kids, and this is the first time I've ever reported such an incident. I would like feedback to my sighting, and I would be happy to contact them on my mobile or email should you require further information. There's an inquisitive, concerned nature to what these people are saying. They're wanting follow-up on this. I think what you tend to find is when people see things, there's a genuine concern and an unsettledness that comes along with seeing something like this. How did the MoD respond? It was the same reply. But look again to the dates. The email was sent on the 9th of November, clear concern, and it was a day later. That one sounds quite an interesting one, because it's also showing that it had forward momentum, but it literally stopped and changed its direction. And is it showing the underside of it, where you've got other lights which are generated from the underneath it? It was very different to everything else that I've read from this particular month. But this was a busy night, a really busy night. So let's go on as travels again. We move on to Colchester. And again, right at the beginning, you can see it's the 7th of November again. It's approximately at this point 20 past 7 in the evening. And while the witness is standing outside their flat in Colchester, her husband was having a cigarette. They saw 4 slow-moving round orange lights in the sky moving from southeast to northwest. The first light appeared and it looked like a really large ball of fire, which was faintly pulsing. An interesting thing you hear about these things, about the observations of them, that they have like a throbbing view to them, a pulse. It's not a standard light, it's like it's emitting light, it's not a light, it's kind of got an energy to it. It emitted no sound, and while I was travelling in a straight line I watched it move away into the distance, and as it was moving away I saw the rear end of the UFO and it seemed to have not a single light, which is interesting. So where is that orange light coming from? It only had the bright orange light on the front, and they were moving quite slowly, almost on a slow plane, but somehow seemed completely different, very strange, like nothing we have ever seen before. We then saw another light exactly the same as the first one about 1 minute later, following the exact same path. It looked and behaved exactly the same as the first one. Neither of them emitted any sound at all and they were completely silent. This time I tried to record the UFO on my camera, but I was not quick enough and missed it. But I kept my phone out just in case any more lights came past. And then 1 minute later, another light exactly the same as the previous 2 came past, following the same course in the sky, except this one where there was another light, which was the same as all the others, following closely behind it, and we could see 2 of them in the sky at once. Because I had my camera phone out, I still managed to record both the lights, and when we looked at the video after the lights had disappeared, the UFOs seemed to be pulsing and changing colour. They seemed mainly white on the video, but they seemed to change colour through all the colours of the rainbow. Something else you hear a lot, like they changed their characteristics. We told our neighbour, who came down for a cigarette himself a few minutes later, and he said he'd seen something exactly the same, but he had seen 7 or 8 of them close together. We saw the first one at 20 past 7, and we saw the last one about 25 past 7. The response that came back after the 7th was, the report was sent on the 8th, and the standard letter was then sent out on the 9th. What's interesting, as I'm looking, none of the information which was provided from the video is actually on the document, so you've only got the email testimony here. Again, very similar things being seen in very different parts of the UK. Let's continue our travels. And this is going to be our last one for this particular week. And at this point we get to Peterborough. And this one's a really interesting one because of what you've probably seen already down at the bottom of the email. So this was reported in on the 9th. Good day, I wish to report a most unusual sighting on Saturday evening, November the 7th. From our garden in the northeastern side of Peterborough, we saw an orange sphere, again, proceeding on a straight course towards the north at 21:59 hours until 22:01 hours. The elevation was approximately 30 degrees above eastern horizon and the speed was substantial, and it was in excess of 300 miles per hour at a guess. There was no noise, no normal aviation lights, just an eerie orange glow. Although extremely difficult to judge, the height was probably above 1,000 feet and maybe a lot higher. A neighbour saw a similar sight on the same evening at 21:30, but at the western sky, an elevation of about 50 degrees above the horizon. Some friends in Huniston, 35 miles to the east of us, saw a similar object again at 5:30, again proceeding on a northerly course. As a former commander in the Royal Navy and a keen astronomer, I should be very interested to hear your views as to what this object might have been. It was not a Chinese lantern, not a satellite. And an interesting point on satellites, satellites don't have lights. The only lights they can have is the reflection from the sun. Nor a helicopter, nor a light aircraft. I look forward to hearing from you. So you've got someone that's been around military equipment, probably seen his fair share of aeroplanes, jets, and even he's looking at this and going, this is not normal. It's an orange weird light that's travelling across the sky. 300 miles an hour and no noise either. So that was sent in on the 9th, and on the 9th, the very same day, the standard letter was sent back. It looks as though he contacted twice as well here, you can see. So you got the email and you've got a phone call in as well at the same time from the same person to the hotline. These are coming from people that really are concerned when you see these things that we don't have a handle on it. And I suppose this is where it's getting me to, and the reason why I want to know more, and I'll explain as well why I've gone to these files more than anything, is when you say there's not a threat, and this is the thing that you see with people like Ryan Graves and everything that's happening in the US, if you have these kind of things flying into airspace whenever they really just want to, with no control, how can you say that these aren't a threat? How can you say that they're going to cause an accident, crash into a plane, which is the line that they're going down over in the States to try and get this to get more attention? I just think it's quite silly. And I get that kind of when you think about the kind of the process of the desk, and it's just ended up being an administrative function more than anything else, you do have to kind of question really that, well, we don't have control over our airspace, do we? We have these coming and going at will. To kind of put the perspective of, to help put a little bit of this into perspective as well, what I've tried to do is make it visually representative onto a map. So, as you can see here, I've snipped and pasted a copy of the map. And when you start to look at November as a month, you can see that there's the spread really. These are representative lights in the sky, orange orbs, red lights, white lights. But you can see that the spread of them is vast. One of the key questions I wanted to answer was, is there any kind of correlation between significant air bases in the UK and where we are actually seeing these things? And I honestly thought that we would see a concentrated view of these sightings to aircraft installations. But there isn't. They're widespread. Completely widespread. Especially in the place where I'm from, around here. A massive concentration there, of even black triangles as well. I don't know how to think about this, to be quite honest with you. And I'm kind of open to see where this journey takes me as I try to find out more. It makes me wonder, is this kind of a blast of trying to get people to see them, to, you say, like you hear almost trying to wake people up and kind of get people to accept that there are things happening in the sky that we don't have control over. This is the start of this. This is the first thing I'm doing. I'd love to hear what people think. My aim is to try and go through October's in the next couple of weeks, and see how that affects this and this. and almost try to compare them to see if there are correlations between what's being seen where. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I love this topic. Anybody who knows me knows I love this topic. And I don't know what to make of this data to start off with. It's really, I think I was more confused by it than I expected to be. I expected some correlation, I expected some patterns, but there are none. The only pattern that seems to be is the nature of the type of UFO. I really wouldn't mind seeing if that continues as we go backwards in time. And it sounds as though I've actually looked at probably the worst month, or the highest volume in a month, in a period of time, for the entire documents. But we'll see where it takes us. And I'd be interested to know if anybody else has got any more, and obviously questions that you guys might ask around this data that I'm not thinking of too. I'm coming at it with a kind of really base level view, to quote Gary Nolan, around just trying to figure out what the data is telling me. And at the minute, I mean, it's the first month, so it's not really telling me anything. I need to kind of see how I correlate it against other information as it becomes a little bit more front-facing as I look through this. I want to mention as well, the reason why I'm looking at this data and not any other website, my assumption would be you would get general people reporting this in concerned going to the military, rather than just any old report being put into a website or any other means. This was about people going out of their way to mention it to the military out of concern that they're seeing something in the sky. So that's the reason why I did this. Anyway, with that, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll try and get another one out soon. Thank you.